After around 9 years in development, multiple delays and multiple studio changes, Dead Island 2 is finally coming out in just over a month's time. Barring any real-world zombie apocalypses, that is, which, to be honest with you, wouldn't surprise me one bit after the last few years. But even if we do experience a world-ending calamity between now and the 21st of April, let it be known that Dead Island 2 did actually exist, and it was playable from start to finish. And I should know, because I've played through the first 5 hours of the campaign for this preview video. So join me, Eurogamer's Ian Higton, for 5 things we liked about Dead Island 2 and 3 things we didn't. But because I learnt my lesson from the last time I did a Dead Island 2 preview, which no one watched because it got age-gated, this time I'm going to cover all the images of gore with pictures of my cats. You're welcome. Considering the absolutely chaotic production process of Dead Island 2, you'd be forgiven for thinking that the only similarities with the original games by now would be in name only. But in what should be good news for fans of the series, Dead Island 2 not only feels like a true successor to Dead Island, but crucially, it also feels way more polished than the Eurojank originals from Techland ever were. At the start of the game, there's a lengthy cutscene that introduces you to the 6 playable protagonists, each of whom has a different over-the-top personality and set of skills. But, word of warning, choose wisely, because if you want to play as anyone else, you'll need to restart the entire game. What follows after that prologue is a bonkers, over-the-top, zombie-whacking romp through various locations in and around LA, as you do missions for a surprisingly large cast of characters, each of whom is a caricature of LA personality stereotypes, like the uppity leading lady, the eccentric old movie star, and the drug-addled old rock star.
Sorry, zombie, party's over.
Not a zombie, just...
Is it a pizza?
Hey, do you have pizza?
Of course I do. Now let us in.
Yeah. Well, if I open this door, a whole load of zombies might rush in, and I'm pretty sure that's a bad thing.
Then why have you left the gate wide open?
Oh, yeah. Well, we're having this big party, right? And some of the guys, not me, were riding on a gate, and it broke. Now, there's a whole bunch of spares in the garage, but it's like full of riffraff.
Fine. I'll give closing it a lash.
Oh, killer. I'll hit the garage button. You bounce the party crashers and fix things up. And then, dude, mi casa is your casa. Hey, Roxy, we got company. Find your jeans.
Some of the characters can be a bit annoying and douchey, and some are actually quite fun to interact with, but in general, it's a light-hearted take on the zombie apocalypse that is more colourful, chaotic and cartoony than gritty and realistic. And that comes as a refreshing change that also feels like the games of old. Dead Island 2's version of LA, cheesily known as Helle in the game, is less of an open world and more of a series of around 10 smaller open areas, each with a different theme that feels bigger than they are thanks to the incredible amount of environmental detail on show. This isn't like the Dying Light series, Techland's spiritual successor to Dead Island, where you could parkour your way through huge but relatively empty open worlds at speed. No, Dead Island 2 is much slower paced and in keeping with the movement schemes of the originals, in that there's no flashy parkour moves and hardly any verticality. The world of Helle actually feels kind of linear, at least in the early few hours of the game anyway, and as I made my way through 5 of these areas, the short prologue tutorial mission set amongst the wreckage of a plane crash, sections of both Bel Air and Beverly Hills, a huge hotel complex and the Monarch movie studios, there was normally a pattern of one main mission and one easy to stumble across side mission in each. It feels like you'll be returning to all of these places multiple times though, so I'm expecting way more missions and side missions to pop up the further you get through the game. As I mentioned earlier, I think the level of detail to each area was what impressed me the most, and I enjoyed wasting a couple of hours here and there exploring the huge, lavish mansions in both Bel Air and Beverly Hills. Each home is packed to the rafters with little details of environmental storytelling that makes them feel lived in, and like people were going about their lives in them before literally dropping everything behind in an instant as the zombies began attacking. I don't have much footage of it here, but one house I explored belonged to a crew of internet influencers, and that house was bursting with personality, featuring filming sets and podcast booths, a small underground bar, arcade and bowling alley area, and a rooftop bar area complete with a sound system that acted as an arena for a side mission that involved killing zombies for a viral video. While these locations were mainly like the NPCs, caricatures of life in LA, they were still so much fun to explore, and with loads of little hidden areas to find, people who enjoy going off the beaten path are going to have so much fun here. You know, when you have an open world that seems massive, but when you get into it you realise you can't go into any of the buildings, and when you do they have copy and paste interiors that feel like the same structure over and over again? Well, that is definitely not the case here, and it made exploration in Dead Island 2 an utter joy. Generally, the missions in Dead Island 2 amount to fetch quests. Go here to get this, but first you need to defeat these zombies to get this to open that. You know the kind of thing. What sets these missions apart from other games though can be found in my two previous points. The fact that everything is so extra. With the wacky NPCs shouting orders and the over-the-top environments to fight inside, like the Monarch movie studios that come complete with different film sets to interact with as you beat off hordes of hungry Zeds, what would normally be quite bland missions become comical romps where there's always something interesting to see or do. One mission where I had to fight my way through a huge hotel complex included an area where I could drop-kick zombies into a pool of caustic liquid that melted them as soon as they came into contact with it. Then the level moved on to a spooky search through darkened hotel rooms until finally I arrived at the remnants of a wedding party where I had to battle a huge Apex variant zombie that was dressed in a wedding dress. There's so much imagination and variety and comedy here. Everything is so stupid and silly and over the top, and it all goes towards making this type of Far Cry Light open world mission structure that I've played so many times before feel both fresh and exciting. In a game that's probably about 80% hitting zombies with objects, you really need to have a bit of variety in there to make sure things don't get too boring. The standard combat in Dead Island 2 can be quite dull. Pick up a thing, hit zombies with a thing, block some attacks and then dodge at the right time to leave that zombie stunned and open to a powerful counterattack. What mixes things up a bit and makes combat way more interesting is the focus on elemental attacks and the sandbox-style way that you can play around with different elements for different effects. For instance, you'll quickly unlock the ability to craft weapons with elemental effects, such as electrical attacks or burn damage, and these will make it much easier to take out the Walking Dead heads, although, word of warning, zombies do come in elemental flavours too, and electric zombies are immune to electricity damage, while flaming Zeds are immune to fire damage, and so on and so on. I had the most fun with elemental combat when experimenting with the areas I was fighting in. For instance, if I spotted a group of zombies in a swimming pool, I'd search around for car batteries to throw into the water, which would then electrocute them all with a satisfying spark and fizzle. Another thing I enjoyed doing was pouring petrol near groups of zombies who were conveniently eating a dead body next to some gas cylinders. Then I'd whack the end of the petrol trail with an electric weapon to ignite it and watch as the flames rushed towards the zombies and burnt and then exploded them in a gruesome display of fleshy fireworks. There's so many little opportunities to troll zombies in this game that half of the time just running around experimenting with bullying the undead was enough to keep me entertained without even having to follow the story. It's true sandbox combat in its purest form.
The Halperin Hotel. You can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave.
And in terms of combat, the gore in this game is on another level to anything else I've ever seen in a video game. And I've played a lot of video games. The procedural way that the zombies come apart as you hit, melt, shock and burn them really has to be seen to be believed. And it's both gruesome and glorious at the same time. It's like an early Peter Jackson movie come to life, and honestly, if you're a horror movie gorehound, the visuals in this game are going to leave you whooping your beautiful little faces off, because there are some spectacular displays of dismemberment and destruction here. It's a shame then that I can't really show you these scenes without risking this video going 18+, but believe me when I say that underneath all of these cat pictures are some of the best and goriest kills that I've seen since Doom 2016's Glory Kills.
Hell yeah! Fighting music! I can jam to this.
Not everything about Dead Island 2's combat is brilliant though, and that's what brings me onto the section of the things that I didn't really like about the game. Starting with how every zombie seems to be an incredible damage sponge. Now there are ways to take out zombies quickly, especially using the aforementioned elemental traps, but in general, even when you're hitting zombies with an elemental weapon, they can still take a lot of hits to bring down. Especially as they do a lot of damage to you when they fight back. Pinpointing the weak points of certain zombies helps here, like chopping the legs off of runner zombies or cutting the arms off of bigger brute zombies that can do smash attacks. But you're still going to need to whack them multiple times to bring them down if you're stuck with melee weapons and nothing in the environment to take advantage of. And after about 5 hours, that did start getting a bit dull for me. The repetitive hitting and chopping was soon replaced with first boredom and then the realisation that I could just run past most zombies and not even bother fighting them at all, unless it was called for in the mission, of course. As much as I loved the elemental combat, my patience levels have been ruined by video games, and I slowly started to wish that the zombies in Dead Island 2 were a bit more squishy than the stamina-sapping punch bags that populate LA.
Genius.
Hey, were you getting the pizza, or were you fighting zombies in the yard?
It's kind of a minor point, this one, I guess, but due to the multiple smaller locations in Dead Island 2, there is a fair amount of loading time in this game, as you're constantly skipping between locations. As I mentioned at the start, I played the first 5 hours of the game, and in that time, I bounced between about 5 different areas, each with a loading screen between them. Sure, it's not the end of the world, but I can see this being a bit of a pain near the end game when you're quickly moving between all unlocked areas in order to hoover up secrets or complete the side missions that you may have missed. And finally, I've got to say that the much hyped Dead Island 2 skill card system seemed to be rather pointless, at least in the first 5 hours anyway. You see, in Dead Island 2, each character starts with 2 character-specific skill cards that gives them extra perks and abilities to use as you play, and as you progress through the game, you'll earn more of these, which you can then activate at any time. It's easy to swap them all out on the fly to give yourself extra combat boosts depending on the situation, but honestly, in the first 5 hours of the game, I really didn't find any cards that drastically changed the way my character played or handled situations, other than the card which allowed me to perform drop kicks. Other cards that did things like causing knockback effects when using first aid kits seemed to be really ineffectual against the damage sponge enemies, and most of my active cards felt like they were having no discernible effect on the gameplay at all. Perhaps this will change later on in the game if you're given more powerful, harder to unlock skill cards, but even with the ability to change cards depending on the situation, I still felt that they were an underwhelming addition to the game, in the early hours at least. Perhaps this will change later down the line once you're given more powerful, harder to unlock skill cards, but even with the ability to change out these cards depending on the situation, in those first few hours of the game, they still felt like an underwhelming addition to the proceedings.
Okay, back on track to get to this.
And
intel.
those were my thoughts on my first 5 hours of playing Dead Island 2. It's an almost perfect AA style game that's gory and stupid enough to hold my attention and keep me entertained, even when the combat started to feel like a bit of a chore. If you love the Dead Island series, then this long-awaited sequel should be right up your street. It doesn't nail every aspect, but it does improve on the Techland originals in almost every way, and I can't wait to explore the other areas of LA that I wasn't able to reach during my preview. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please do give it a like, subscribe to this channel for almost daily videos about video games, and keep an eye out for more Dead Island 2 coverage soon, including some co-op live streams once the game releases, which I won't be able to edit cat photos into, so you'll finally be able to see all that glorious zombie blood and guts in its full magnificence. Goodbye.